lights. I won't read you your wrongs or your rights. The time has gone. I'll tell you good night, close the door. Tell you I love you once more. The time has gone, so here it is. I'm not your son, you're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye. No need to forgive, no need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine. And while you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud. So daddy, won't you just close your eyes? Don't be afraid. It's my time to chase the monsters away. Oh, well, I'll read a story to you. Only difference is this one is true. The time has gone. I folded your clothes on the chair. I hope you sleep well, don't be scared. Time has gone, so here it is. I'm not your son, you're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye. No need to forgive, no need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine. And while you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud. So daddy, won't you just close your eyes? Don't be afraid. It's my time to chase the monsters away. Sleep a lifetime, yes, and breathe the last word. You can feel my hand on your arm. I will be the last one, so I leave a light on. Let there be no darkness in your heart. But I'm not your son, you're not my father. We're just two grown men saying goodbye. No need to forgive, no need to forget. I know your mistakes and you know mine. And while you're sleeping, I'll try to make you proud. So daddy, won't you just close your eyes? Don't be afraid. It's my time to chase the monsters away.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike, now you can hear me. Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, I welcome you here today. We've come together to honour and remember the life of Albert Harold Markley, but I'm pretty sure you all know him just as Bud. I want to extend a special welcome to those joining us via the live stream and to the many who have travelled from Victoria, New South Wales and across Queensland to be here today. Your presence, whether in person or in spirit, is a testament to the impact Bud has on so many lives, the love and respect you have for him and his family. Bud was a man who's touched the hearts of everyone who knew him. He was a loving husband to his dear wife, Lil, and a devoted father to his two boys, Paul and John. And at 92 years young, Bud lived a life full of passion, laughter and love. As we gather to celebrate his life, we remember not just the man, but the legacy he leaves behind. His life was filled with things he really loved the most: his family, motorbikes, sports, and the simple joys of life like watching the sunrise and enjoying a good meal. Today is about remembering a good man. It's been said that he had a good innings, living a good life. Of equal importance, though, is each of you here this afternoon. So I ask, in remembering Bud, please remember that there are those whose grief will be deeper and take longer. Losing someone who's been a part of your life, be it big or small, is the beginning of a challenging journey, and I suggest that you be gentle with yourself. So remember, every case, every person, every situation is different. We should give ourselves permission to grieve precisely the way we need to. I'd now like to invite Bud's sons, John and Paul, to come forward and share some words and memories with us.
Well, thank you all for being here. On behalf of Lil, myself, my wife Joan, and our children Aaron, Brock and his partner Tammy and Callan, as well as his great-grandchildren Jordan and Madison, my brother Paul, his wife Jeanette, and his children Andrew and his wife Sarah, Claire and partner Matthew and Peter. We all thank you for being here in attendance today. I know that there have been many who have travelled to be with us, but I'd just like to say a special welcome to Bud's sisters Bev and Faye and nieces Kim, Lisa and Annette, who are here from Melbourne. It's much appreciated. Well, where do I start? In the beginning, the Lord said, "Let there be light." Oh, not that far back. Albert Harold. Yes, Albert Harold, born in Melbourne on the 18th of May 1932. The eldest child to, you guessed it, Albert Harold and Jessie Markley. It didn't take too long for one of the uncles to declare Albert was no name for a little fella and nicknamed him Buddy. And from that time onwards, he was forever known as Buddy or simply Bud. Bud was the eldest of 5 children. He was followed by Evelyn, Shirley, Bev and Faye, and he lived in a family home in Mitcham, which was very much an outer suburb of Melbourne in the Dandenong Ranges. These days, Mitcham is definitely middle suburbia. It was in Mitcham in his very early childhood that he met 2 great people, Des Smith and Reggie Coleman, who would become lifelong friends until their passing just a couple of years ago. Bud had a fairly typical upbringing in Melbourne, attending Mitcham Primary School, Box Hill Technical College, playing cricket and Australian rules, amongst many other sports and pastimes. Work started at about 14 or 15, but one of his first jobs was to deliver ice to the fridges of the day. But the cold Melbourne mornings took their toll and he moved on to something else. That something else, would you believe, was as a junior tailor. Could you imagine Bud as a tailor? I don't think taking the inside leg measurement was his forte. That lasted apparently about 3 days and he moved on to becoming a painter, which was following in his father's footsteps. It was during those years that Bud found his first true love. Not a woman, you know it was motorbikes. That wasn't until he met Lil sometime later. Motorcycle racing in Victoria at that time had some of the biggest names in the sport of the era. Names like Ray Owens, Kenny Rumble, Ivan Tighe, Bert Flood, Jock Broad, Billy and Neil Street, just to name a few. Bud and his mates Des and Reg joined the famous Nuttawanning Motorcycle Club, become avid participants and followers of racing and travelling far and wide throughout Victoria, South Australia and New South Wales. Well, that travel bug didn't stop, and the day after his 21st birthday in 1953, Bud and his 4 mates, Des, Reg, Ocker O'Brien and Dinger Bell, packed an old Model A Ford and headed north. Several weeks later, they arrived in Rocky, just a leisurely 330 kilometres away and about 3.5 hours drive to Mackay. Well, not in 1953. Dirt road all the way, no bridges. And after many punches and breakdowns that they had to fix themselves, they arrived in Mackay some 3 days later. They quickly set up camp at Far Beach, and that's where they stayed for several months. After returning briefly to Melbourne, he returned in 1954, and from that day onwards, he called Mackay home. It was during this time that Bud was taken by a stunning young lady of Italian descent named Lilia Vitali, who was working at the Tourist Cafe. How many romances started at the Tourist Cafe? Anyway, after some initial resistance, hold back there, Bud, Lil finally agreed to start dating Bud, and they were married the day after Bud's 24th birthday in 1956. That was the 19th of May. Lil reckons they chose that date so he wouldn't forget the anniversary. At the time, Bud was working for the Public Works as a painter and predominantly worked out of town, painting many government buildings throughout the region. Children followed. I was born in October 1959, Paul November 1960. Didn't give Lil much rest, did you, Bud? Bud and Lil then moved into a newly purchased home in Atkinson Street in 1962 and have lived there ever since. Atkinson Street was a great place to grow up in. Many young families along the street, which meant plenty of playmates for Paul and I. There was also a large tidal swamp right beside the house that would become our playground for many, many years. Having a young family and working out of town every week started to take its toll on Bud, and he and Lil and John and Betty Bartlett decided to take up the lease on BP Daydawn, which was at the end of Sydney Street, where the United Service Station currently stands. The lease also came with the RACQ breakdown service, which meant that either Bud or John were on call 24 hours a day to attend crashes and breakdowns. When the lease expired, Bud started his own business, auto repair and towing service, and set up shop in Peel Street beside Hope's Panel Beating and Percy Wallen Spray Painting. He remained there until he sold the business to Billy and Lynn Coxon in 1979. Looking back on those days, I don't really know how Bud and Lil did it. The RACQ was much different to what it is now. There was no internet, no apps, no central call centre to advise people of road closures or conditions or call when you needed assistance. Basically, they were a one-man show. When the main office closed at 5 p.m, and on the weekends, all calls were diverted to our home phone. Could you imagine the number of calls that we received, especially during the wet season when it was multiplied several times over? We were all trained up to take those calls, even Paul and I as 7 or 8 year olds. But even with all the mayhem, I hardly ever saw Bud get flustered or complain, even though he was in the truck or service vehicle almost 24 hours a day. I do recall him getting a bit irate with someone who rang him and said, "Look, I'm coming up to Mackay in 4 weeks' time. Can you tell me if it will be raining and will the roads be open?" To which Bud replied, "My name is not Jesus Christ," and hung up. How he maintained the workload, I do not know. His work ethic could never, ever be questioned, and that continued with everything he did, especially when it came to his beloved bikes and the motorcycle associations. One thing I'm glad of is Bud never entered into the medical profession. Each misdiagnosed broken bone was met with, "No, it's not broken, you'll be okay." That was quickly followed by Lil taking us to the x-ray and then to the doctor saying, "Oh, John, you've got a broken jaw. Oh, Paul, you've got a broken ankle. Oh, John, you've got a broken hand," which Bud would say, "No, it didn't look broken at the time." Thanks very much, Dr. Markley. But anyway, yet with all the workload, he still found time to involve himself with many other activities. He raced go-karts for many years and was heavily involved in the club when it started racing at Glenalla. He used to race karts with a Victor motor mower engine in it, tuned by the legendary Bert Flood. I recall it was very fast, but had a lot of trouble keeping the pistons intact. He also found time to be involved in the swimming club that Paul and I were involved in. He was on the committee, took us to training and to swim meets all over the state. It was there he made many lifetime friends, including the Vandervelds and Tomlins family. He was also a member of the West Mackay Rotary Club for many, many years. And Cole Meng sends his apologies today because Cole has unfortunately contracted COVID. He also never lost that travel bug. Every year we'd pack up the car and head off down to Melbourne to meet with family and friends. Somehow it always coincided with a car, bike or a speedway meeting, or several of them. In fact, Bud would travel just about anywhere to go to a meeting. We'd go from Phillip Island to Oran Park to Lakeside to the old Gold Coast Raceway to see cars and bikes. And we were lucky enough to see some of the legendary names in that sport, such as Jack Brabham, Jim Clark, Agostini and Roger DeCosta, just to name a few. Paul and I were certainly privileged. When Bud retired from the business in 1979, that bug didn't stop, and he and Lil set out on one of their many caravan trips around Australia. I think it was 5 or 6 in total, not forgetting the short tours along the coast, meeting and forging many wonderful friends along the way. But it's fair to say Bud loved motorbikes. Everything about them, from the bikes, the tracks and the people. I remember as if it were yesterday when Bud made us our first bike. He somehow got I think I was about 5 and Paul was about 4. I think it was about, he got a wrecked Suzuki 50 from somewhere. The only thing salvageable was the motor. No problem, just bend some 3/4 inch water pipe, shape it into a frame, weld a mounting plate for the motor, put on the front forks that were bent and never worked, rigid back end, no, don't worry about shock absorbers, some wheelbarrow wheels and there you have it. Don't worry about brakes either, but he figured we didn't need them. Straight steel foot pegs that didn't fold back, but it was a motorbike, and Paul and I flogged that thing around the swamp for many years. When we started competing in the early 70s, Bud was in his element and started a more than 50-year association with the sport. On just about any weekend, we'd set off to a meeting somewhere, whether it was local or anywhere throughout the state. Bud would be driving the fair lane listening to his favourite music and the rest of us piled in the car. Like many of us who travel with him, if I ever hear another Max Bygrave song, I will scream, because that's all he played, that and Jim Reeves. But he loved it and he drove all the way. He loved driving. On lots of occasions we had others like David Cullen, Johnny Landles or Nick Sedorkin travelling with us. So Lil would have to stay at home. Secretly, I think she enjoyed staying home on those weekends. Often at local meetings, Bud would be there on a Saturday saying hello to anyone and everyone who would turn up and say, why don't you come round to our place for dinner tonight? He would then go home about 5:36, plenty of time to make dinner, he figured, and say, Lil, got a few people coming around tonight. Lil would say, how many? Thinking 4 or 5, but no, not for Bud. Oh, about 30. Lil would have a fit, followed by some terse words, but somehow she managed to prepare enough food and have leftovers for everyone. Bud just loved those sort of interactions with the people that used to come around to our place. The motorcycle club, Mackay Motorcycle Club meetings used to be there as well, committee meetings held at Bud and Lil's in the kitchen, and they were always fully attended, not because people were interested in club committee meetings, but because Lil would serve up cakes and scones. I think Nick Sedorkin still holds the record for the most scones consumed in one meeting. When we stopped racing, Bud just kept on doing the things he loved, heavily involved in all aspects of the sport. He was instrumental in setting up CQ Motorcycle Association and the CQ Series. When John Fenton started promoting Supercross throughout Australia, he didn't have to look too far for someone to help run the meetings. Bud was there in a flash. He and Lil would often talk about those days and how much he enjoyed it all, but especially with the association of the riders at the time. He used to say they kept him young. You might not have noticed this, but Bud loved to chat. He would always make time to say hello to everyone, no matter their standing in life. I'm sure that this is one of the reasons that Bud was so respected by those who knew him. I read a report recently from a race meeting held in 2021 where the author said in the story that it was awesome to see the legend Bud Markley come down to watch the racing. I'm sure that Bud was proud of all the things that he achieved in his life. I know that all of us and his family are proud of the legacy that he has left. He was enthusiastic about everything he did, whether it was work, sport, family or friends. When Joan and I had our 3 children, 3 boys, he was just as enthusiastic about everything in their life as well, as he was with Paul and Jeanette and their 3 children. One of Bud's best traits is that he never whinged, complained or dwelled on things for too long. I was there in a few years ago when the doctor said that he had bowel cancer, to which he simply replied, oh well, you have to expect something to be wrong when you get to my age, and just got on with it. Well, buddy, it's time to say goodbye. You lived a full and enriched life. I'm sure you died the most content and happy man, having achieved more in your lifetime than others can only dream about. You loved life, you loved your family and friends. Most of all, you loved your best mate of more than 68 years in Lil. As she loved you, as we all loved you. We will miss you, but we will never forget you. Rest in peace, legend.
Well, I've got many happy memories of Bud, Dad, but I'm not going to stand here and bore you with all those memories. I'll just share with you with some of the memories of mine, of our family. I always remember Bud, Dad, as a loving, caring and patient man. I can remember when he was teaching me to ride that mini bike with no brakes. I put him through the front fence because I had no brakes. But he just says, don't worry. But I think I had stitches in that leg. But he said, just get back on that bloody motorbike and you'll be right. And it's just that, you'll be right, mate. And I also remember the loving and caring and sharing that he gave to all his grandchildren. Aaron, Brock, Cal, Andrew, Peter, Claire. He just loved them, and they loved him back. When we used to travel from Brisbane to Mackay, we'd stop at Rockhampton, and we say to our kids, do you want to stop here with Lenny? Or do you want to carry on to Mackay? And they always answer, we just want to go and see Bud and Nanalil. So off we go, pack him up in the car again and travel the 4 hours to Mackay. And when we get here, they'd get out of the car and always give Nanalil and Bud the big hug. And then they say to Bud, when are we going to go for a drive in your big car and go fishing? So the next day, Bud would pack us all up in his Nissan Patrol. The kids just loved that Nissan Patrol. And away we go. Either to Cape Hillsborough, Seaforth, Youngalla. And then he would check the tide times. And say, okay, kids, he said, it's low tide at such and such a time. So he'd pack the kids up in the Nissan Patrol and go down to the town beach and pump yabbies. The kids, they didn't even know what a yabby was. But where he went, they'd come back home, and the kids would be full of mud, head to toes, and a smile on them, ear to ear. And poor old Bud, he'd come in with a sore back, and but he didn't mind, he didn't care. He said he was just out there having fun with his grandkids. And then anyway, then he'd take them fishing. But Bud didn't have much time fishing to do fishing. He was too busy baiting the hooks. But there again, it didn't worry him. He didn't care. He was just out there having fun with his grandkids. He just loved his grandkids. Anyway, it's time to say goodbye, Bud. So pick up your bloody stopwatch and your clipboard and get that race meeting up there underway, will you? Love you all, mate. Bye.
Some lovely memories. Thanks for sharing those. I'd now like to invite David Evans, a long-term family friend and neighbour, to come forward and share his reflections and memories of Bud.
Firstly, let me say how proud and privileged I was when John and Paul asked me if I'd say a few words about the relationship that I had with Bud. And I'm going to start a bit closer. Is that better? Now, there are a lot of people here who would have spent time in the Markley kitchen because Bud and Lil love their entertaining. And most of you would no doubt have heard this sound before. Now, some people might think that that's a bit of a chauvinistic practice on Bud's part, but I think I'd rather prefer it to compare it to the Olympics, which recently finished. And as they turn to the last lap in the Olympics, of course, they ring the bell to let the competitors know that they're nearing the end. So I think Bud was actually doing a favour by Lil, so Lil didn't have to jump up and snap a hammy when it was time for his second cup of tea. I think we'd known Bud for well over a year before I found out his real name wasn't Bud. Not even Lil called him Albert, even if she was cross with him, but then she was rarely ever cross with him. Apart from Bud, he was often referred to as Buddy, but Kylie, our younger daughter, when we were going around Australia, gave him the nickname Buddy Boy. Every morning when the caravans pulled out of where we'd spent the night, the first thing Kylie did was jump on the CB radio and ask, "Have you got your ears on, Buddy Boy?" We first met Bud and Lil in 1980 when we were transferred to Mackay and moved into the bank house over the road from them. They virtually adopted us, and that friendship continued long after we moved back to Brisbane some 4 years later. Bud's loves were Lil, fishing, motorbikes, fair lanes, four-wheel drives, watching sport and caravanning, but sometimes he got the order confused. In 1981, we had the first of our boys' trips up to Inkerman Station in the Gulf country, and we ended up going back in 11 of the next 13 years. It fell to Lil and Chris to prepare the menu and to do the food prep, even down to detailing the 10-day menu on a nice big piece of cardboard. On our inaugural trip, everything was going fine until our first night beside the Staten River. It had been raining and Bud and Bill were having trouble starting the campfire when one of them decided that the big piece of cardboard should be able to get it going. Well, I can tell you there was a little bit of confusion over the next 10 days as to what we were eating with what. I think it is safe now to let Lil know that Bud could cook. It would be fair to say that he was not bad as a camp cook, and he was even a dab hand at making up Deb mashed potato. He once told me that Lil got so much satisfaction over the time she spent in her kitchen that it would have been guilty to deprive her of one of her greatest joys in life. Lil would prepare the Gulf trip meals beforehand, even down to par cooking and freezing the stews. She even packed Bud's suitcase for him, to the extent that when he had his stretcher set up, he could open up that old suitcase and there, with great big safety pins pinned together, would be Monday shorts, Monday shirt and Monday underwear. And that is a true story. Secretly, we had all hoped that one year Bud would have pissed Lil off so much that with the preparations, that when he opened the suitcase, it would be stuffed full of old newspapers and a note saying, "You can pack your own suitcase in future, buddy boy." To suffice to say, that never happened, but I've yet to meet a man who was so overdrawn when it came to brownie points. With most of us, brownie points expire at midnight on the day they were earned, but not in the case of our Bud. Another of Bud's passions were four-wheel drives. He convinced me to buy my first one, a small blue LJ80 Suzuki. It only had 2 seats, but many was the trip Paulie bounced around on beanbag in the back while we wound our way up to Youngala, where Bud and Lil would have set up the caravan. I still remember the day Buddy decided I should buy an old Range Rover that had been traded in at International Motors. It was flat out running and handled like a pig, but he quickly fitted a set of new diaphragms in the carbies. We put some new tyres on it and it was a flyer. The only real problem was it was a 2-door, and by then our firstborn Melissa had come along. So Bud decided the easiest way to get her in and out was through a side window. He always had a solution to every challenge, and I don't think I ever saw him stumped and unable to work out a fix. The fun we had with that old Rangie set me off on a lifetime of ownership of Land Rover products, something I have cursed him for on many occasions. One of the other great joys was fishing, and he was a motivating force for all of our trips up north. Now, Bud was a handy fisherman, but not overly keen on wielding a filleting knife. So it was usually Joe Gralo and I on the filleting duties, while Bud dried the fillets and packaged them up. It was only after a few trips that it occurred to me that from our very first trip, Bud had worked out that after a few refreshing ales and a couple of scotches, it was a lot safer not to be handling sharp knives. Later in life, he continued with this philosophy. Whenever he returned from whiting fishing down Binnington Esplanade, he would proudly announce how successful his outing had been, whilst depositing the catch in the kitchen sink for Lily to scale and fillet. Another hidden talent of Bud's that few people would be aware of was his innate sense of direction. When you had spent the day traipsing around Diner Island and were tired and emotional and heading back across country towards the Staten River, it was always Bud who would intuitively know where the boat was tied up. If everyone else in the party disagreed with him on the direction to take, then he would march off on his own line across the salt pans, and the rest of us would hit the river about a kilometre upstream from where he would be quietly sitting in the boat waiting for us. In 1994, Bud and Lil returned from one of their many trips in Melbourne with another caravan in tow. They still had the old Jayco pop top, and one night Bud rang up and suggested that we should do a lap with them. We would use the Jayco and they would tow the new van and use it as a chuck wagon. We had a fantastic 3 months on the road and still have very fond memories of our time together. In a real case of deja vu, I recently bought a Jayco pop top, the first caravan I've ever owned. I rang Bud to tell him, and he was delighted for us. Sadly, later that week he passed away, so we won't get the opportunity to revisit all his old Jayco stories. Bud was always popular with the ladies, and I thought he had a finely tuned appreciation of the fairer sex. Unfortunately, in the dim night at Youngalla one night, he became enamoured over the potential beauty of a neighbouring camper. I'm sure Lily will be able to fill you in on the embarrassing details over a cup of tea at Atkins Street, and you can also ask her about how easy it is to remove a tick from your groin area in a dimly lit toilet block at night. It will be quieter down the end of Atkins Street in future, particularly when Collingwood plays Bud's beloved Carlton. But I'm sure that Bud would want Finn to keep up the tradition of verbal abuse from across the road. Bud's worst habit was his snoring. I don't know how Lily hasn't ended up strangling him, and no jury in the country would have convicted her after hearing a recording of his efforts. I've slept in bedrooms, motel rooms, sheds, boats and tents with him and never had a good night's sleep. When sharing a tent, my usual trick was to collect every stray shoe around the camp and place them beside my stretcher and throw them at him one at a time. If you were really, really lucky, you could fall asleep before he started up again. If not, then you might as well get up and have another rum and coke. Bud Markley had a remarkable life. In the 44 years I was privileged to know him, I never heard a bad word said about him by anyone who had not had to share sleeping accommodation with him. The world indeed would be a better place with more Bud Markleys in it.
What a great story. Thank you for those beautiful words, Dave. Is there anybody else here that has a story or a few words they'd like to share at this point? Don't rush me. Oh, we've got someone. Beautiful.
Great to see everyone turn up. I'll try and get through this without being emotional, but we'll see how we go. I was one of the beneficiaries of the many trips with Bud all over Queensland, Bundaberg to Mareeba, wherever we went, you know. Bud operated with military precision. I'll pick you up at 6:10 and we'll be gone by 6:15. And you bring a 5 litre can of petrol, you have your riding gear, don't forget your licence, and a small bag of clothing, and that was it. And you're on your way. Listen to Max Bygraves and Jim Reeves. Sad part was, on the way back, we were singing to it. And on the way back, it'd be a scheduled stop, Boyne River, Coliseum. Can have a 2-minute shower in there if you're quick. And he'd have us back for work on Monday morning. We'd be back 12, 1 o'clock, something like that. Always be fairly precise. But yeah, Bud was very grateful, and he knew that he was the luckiest man alive with Bill. Bud was surrounded by a lot of good friends in Melbourne. In fact, the crew that were around Bud in the Nundawating Motorcycle Club were royalty of Victorian motorcycling. A few mentioned before: Ivan Tye, Bill Mill Street, Bert Flood, Jock Boyd, Clem Dinger Bell, Ray Owen, good friend Des Smith, Harold Trapscott, who's still alive at 103. The other surviving chap is Alan O'Brien. Yeah, we wondered how Bud knew so much about motorcycling, but these guys were all within earshot of each other, and they started their bikes on Saturday afternoon, and Ray Owens told me they could pick who was starting their bike, warming it up, getting ready for the Sunday meeting. And Bud followed Ray Owen around. They were childhood friends. Ray Owen's wife, also from Mitcham, went to school with Bud, different years. Bud's youngest sister was a bridesmaid, Evelyn, at Ray and Patsy's wedding. And Patsy's brother went to the Box Hill Technical College with Bud. Yeah, there was lots of history around the Mitcham area, and all those guys went on to have great motorcycling careers. There wasn't really any grey area with Bud. It was black or white. And when he went into bat for Central Queensland Motocross, he made a few enemies, but everybody respected Bud. I've got some messages. First one from Stephen Gould, a motocross legend. Lil and Bud were always so generous with their time to help. I'll miss you, Bud, and the times where we would sit to catch up while eating Lil's famous cookies. Huge condolences. Rest in peace, Bud. And from David Armstrong, it was always enjoyable at the meetings with Bud officiating. Nick Sidorkin, former Mackay resident and motocrosser who we travelled with. Bud always gave us good advice, was a good man, a good person, and was good to me. Generous with his time to a fault, singing along to Jim Reeves and Max Bygraves on our MX trips. He reined us in from time to time as we needed it. That's very true. Kevin Mortimer from Motorcycling Queensland. Bud was a big part of MX and Supercross in Queensland, and that should not be forgotten. Kevin relayed a small story that when Bud was the clerk of the course at Junior Australian Motocross titles, and Bud was holding the riders' meeting, and some overzealous parents started having a bit to say. Bud quickly pulled them up by saying, "This is a riders' meeting, not a parents' meeting." John Fenton, Supercross promoter that Bud and Lil worked closely with. I really enjoyed the Supercross series with Bud and Lil and Norma McWaters. And from Norma's son Ross McWaters, Dr. Ross, the ADB legend, Bud was a great man. Brucey Folks, Bundaberg Motorcycles, an MX racer. I enjoyed Bud and Lil's hospitality while racing in Mackay, and that was a reciprocal arrangement because we often stayed with Bruce Folks and his mother in Bundaberg. John Hand, unfortunately John can't be with us today. I think we all know who John Hand is with his Gum Valley Motorcycle Club. Bud was a legend, and we made him a lifetime member of Gum Valley Motorcycle Club. Even though Bud was in the Mackay District Club, Bud was always on hand to help out and give advice. Gary Flood, son of Bert Flood, perhaps why Buddy was called Bud, because Bert Flood was Albert Flood, so perhaps there were too many Alberts. Bud was a great man to my father Bert. It was great to reacquaint with Bud in January via telephone call. We should have made that road trip as suggested. Keith Webber, Keith Webber learned a lesson that he still remembers today from Bud when they were in a race and Keith's bike chain come off or broke. So Keith put his hand out, only to collect John, knock him off his bike and knock him out. When he got back to the pits, Bud, in his booming voice, all he said to Keith was, "You put your hand up, you don't put your hand out." That's remained with Keith. And we have more, perhaps Patsy Owen, wife, widow of Bud's great friend Ray Owen. Bud travelled everywhere with Ray, be it on the back of the sidecar with the race bike in the side, to meetings, road race meetings, wherever. And there were times where Ray told me that the transporting motorcycle and sidecar, which was also raced, the sidecar was pulled off the side at the track, they raced that one. Well, it broke on the way to meetings, so they pulled the race bike out of the sidecar, pulled the bike apart, down to the crankshaft, pulled the spare race bike off and headed to somebody's farm, reconditioned the crankshaft, reassembled the bike, put it back in the sidecar, rode to the meeting and raced. Such were the times and the ingenuity. Patsy. Bud always called people, I noticed, by the name he nicknamed them. And with myself, it was always Hooksy. With Pat Owen, it was Patsy. And with Ray Owen, it was Owensy. And it was always that. But I'll just end by saying what Patsy told me yesterday. Bud was a lifetime friend. As I said before, went to school with my brother, and she ended by saying he was a perfect bloody friend to the end. Thank you.
Well, Bud, or Albert, whoever you want to be called, for 38 years I never knew that Bud was Albert. I first met Bud 1986 when I started racing. And Bud, you've turned on another good event here, mate, with all these good people to come and respect you for your last. I hold these goggles here today, and on these goggles, it has 100% written on the goggles. As you can see. They haven't made a set of goggles yet for Bud. Bud's goggles will have 200% on it when they're produced. He was a man that put 200% into everything, from little kids to boys and girls to training. His effort was 200% on anything, and for that we are all very, very grateful. Thank you, Bud. I bring this checkered flag today because Bud was a marvel with his stopwatch. He'd race or view the motorcycle events through the day, the riders, and he would jot down times or whatever. And then we'd have the handicap race at the end of the meeting, and obviously the faster guys started last, and the not so fast guys would be going early. And he got it down. It was just perfect at every single race on the handicap race. Bud was just a master at it. He knew riders, he knew motorcycles, he knew to do it backwards and front, backwards and forwards and front, inside and out. So today, Bud, we've got the last moto. What do you call the last moto? I'm going to fly this flag, and you know who's going to win the race. It's Albert or Bud. So when I finish flying the flag, I'd like you all to clap and say, "On you, Bud, you are our champion." Thanks, Bud. And the winner is... Thank you, Bud.
G'day. My name's Roscoe. I'm a friend of Bud's from Town Beach and around his area. I'm going to come at this from a bit of a different angle. You see the stump here behind where he sits on the beach. Many a time used to see Bud in early mornings. Compared to a lot of you, I've basically only knew Bud 5 minutes, basically 2.5 years. The connection we had, I basically looked at Bud like he was a grandfather I never had. Of course, I used to call him Mr. Have-A-Chat because basically I'm a runner, and I used to always train on Town Beach. This is where Bud used to sit, and often see him walking on the sand. And I'd be on the beach pretty much early from 5:30, 6 running. There's a couple of you here that know me from the beach. And the connection we had, I used to finish my trainings, I'd come up the stairs and there's Bud sitting on the table bench in the picnic area. And of course, we sit each other's side, talk for about 40 minutes or more, anything and everything. And yes, the connection was about motorbikes too. I've been riding bikes since I was in the boys' homes. I used to drag bikes at Castlereagh in Sydney and down at Calder in Victoria. I scrambled. So we had that connection there. We talked about different things. I told him about how my father ran a Vincent up a power pole, which Vincent was an old 1000cc motorbikes. But Bud's life and what he had, and he loved his fishing. We talked about fishing as well, because I used to fish a lot when I was a kid. But the thing I loved about him, didn't matter who you were, where you came from. He was in here. he made you feel here. That's what I loved about him. He was the best. Thanks.
Oops.
Good to see the roll up here. There's another side of Bud you probably never saw. Well, I know you always saw him with the stopwatch, biro, clipboard, doing the handicaps and making race meetings run as they should. The other side, there was a few times we went to Brisbane to try and sort out a few things when it went from Motorcycle Council of Australia, Queensland to Motorcycling Queensland. Mackay District Club was the first club in Australia to run mini bikes as part of a senior club. First club in Australia to run training schools for mini bikes. 1972 or 3, we had the Queensland 250 motocross titles in Bayersville, and we run 26 80cc mini bikes out. And the powers from Brisbane that were there were going to hang us out of a tree at sundown. Everything went off well, and convinced Brisbane, if they didn't get their heads out of a place where the sun don't shine, that Queensland Amateur Mini Bike Association would swallow them up within 2 years. So we had some interesting meetings. Bud was pretty forthright when he got his knickers in a knot and told some bloke who thought he was something from down south that he was talking so much poo ticket. Those were the words. The bloke wouldn't talk to us. Oh, well, the other thing was, Bud threw a wad of paper on the table and said, "These give us the right to vote for every club from Gympie north. We can vote down anything that this meeting puts up, and we will." This bloke didn't want to talk to us at smoko or dinner time, and there was a few other head-ons like that along the way that I was sort of sitting in the sidelines watching. He had a great passion for motorcycling right across the board, and he knew anyone who was anyone by their first name. So I hope you put a clipboard and stopwatch in there with him so he can keep doing what he does best. All the best. Rest in peace. Thank you.
We will hear a lot about Bud today, but his life was also captured by the camera. So I'd like to invite you to watch the screens ahead as we see these captured memories.
Big pizza pie, that's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore. Bells will ring, ting-a-ling-a-ling, ting-a-ling-a-ling, and you'll sing Vita vita bella. Hearts will play tippy-tippy-tay, tippy-tippy-tay, like a gay tarantella. When the stars make you drool, just like a pasta fazool, that's amore. When you dance down the street with a cloud at your feet, you're in love. When you walk in a dream, but you know you're not dreaming, signore. Scusa me, but you see, back in old Napoli, that's amore. When dawn moon hits your eye like a big piece of pie, that's amore. That's amore. When the world seems to shine like you've had too much wine, that's amore. That's amore.
Bells will ring,
Ting-a-ling-a-ling,
ting-a-ling-a-ling.
and you sing Vita Bella.
Vita bella, vita bella, hearts will play.
Tippy-tippy-tay, like a gay tarantella. Lucky fella, when the stars make you drool, just like pasta fazool, that's amore. That's amore. When you dance down the street with the cloud at your feet, you're in love. When you walk in a dream, but you know you're not dreaming, signore. Scusa me, but you see, back in old Napoli, that's amore. Amore, that's amore.
Quando
And I'd like to share a reading with you that resonated with the family. It's called A Fallen Limb. A limb has fallen from the family tree, and I hear a voice that says, "Grieve not for me. Remember the best times, the laughter, the song, the good life I lived while I was strong. Continue my heritage. I'm counting on you. Keep smiling and surely the sun will shine through. My mind is at ease, my soul is at rest, remembering all how I was truly blessed. So continue traditions no matter how small. Go on with your life. Don't worry about falls. I'll miss you all dearly. So keep your chin up until the day comes we're together again." Flowers have always been a symbol of love. So now I invite each of you to come forward and lay some flower petals on Bud's coffin. As you come forward, offer up a silent prayer, a wish, or final words to him as your goodbye. I'm sure that you appreciate that this is a difficult time for his family, and I respectfully ask that you leave your condolences to them until after the service. Thank you.
Look for the sun through the rain.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. You know, I never had the opportunity to meet Bud, but I was fortunate that his family painted for me a vibrant picture in my mind of him. That he was a man of many passions, with, of course, motorbikes being at the top of the list. His 50 years of involvement with the motorbikes and clubs is a testament to his dedication and love for that sport. Sometimes, I was told, you even might think that motorbikes were his first love, but I think we know Lil is. But of course his true loves were his family and his friends, and his loyalty to his favourite teams, AFL at Collingwood, the Broncos and the Cowboys. So whether it was swimming, racing or spending time with his boys, particularly when they were younger, Bud was never afraid to get involved. He was there every step of the way, participating wherever he could, always present, always supportive. Lil often said that there wasn't a bad bone in Bud's body. He was gentle and dedicated, kind, honest, loving, and never one to complain. And if you ever found yourself in an argument with Bud, rest assured there was no hard feelings afterwards. His favourite saying, as we heard, was "no worries," which summed up his approach to life, one of acceptance, peace and understanding. Bud's love for his family was profound. He adored his wife Lil, and in return she spoiled him to the end. His boys have often joked that Bud was the most spoilt man in Australia. Lil wouldn't let him lift a finger, not even to make a cup of tea. His life was one of love, ease and simple pleasures. He cherished his children, grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and was always respectful, treating everyone with kindness and care. Bud was a man who believed in doing things right, and more often than not, he was right, especially if you found yourself on the other side of an argument with him. As we close this circle, let us remember Bud's for the remarkable man that he was, a man who loved life, his family and passion. He leaves behind a legacy of love and kindness and dedication that will live on in all of us. I'd just like to share that everybody is invited to join the family for the wake at the South Leagues Club on Milton Street directly after this service. This will be a time to share more stories, more memories, and to celebrate Bud's life in the way he would have wanted it, surrounded by his loved ones. So I thank you all for being here today to honour his memory. Those of you who'd like to form a Guard of Honour, can I ask you to please stand and make your way to make that Guard of Honour, please. And I also call forward the pallbearers. If you can, please stand. Rest in peace, Bud. Your legacy will live on in the hearts of those who loved you, and your spirit will continue to ride on forever free.
Don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away.
Please feel free to follow.
So will you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know